Good evening, everyone. Today I'm gonna share with you about one of the upakilasas called sārambha, which is a one of the very interesting upakilasas actually in the list of upakilasas. Now, sārambha, which we need to actually find out uh, a better meaning actually in terms of what it really means and ways in which it has been used by many scholars and non-scholars in the text and you know uh, tertiary secondary sources. We really want to understand what this means actually. In my search, what I understood about sārambha or impetuousness or vehemence, actually, I want to link these two terms together. For example, now, what is being impetuous? That means uh, someone is going to do things without considering uh, the immediate results, repercussions of those actions, thoughts, and words, or in the long run. So that person does not consider about the immediate results, repercussions of the actions, thoughts, or words, or long-term results of that person's actions, words, and thoughts. Now, when someone is impetuous, that person does not concern about those results or repercussions. So when one is impetuous, then what happens to that person is that that person is going to be vehement. Now, what is being vehement? Now, vehement means the forceful expressions of strong feelings. So that person may show uh, like serious, forceful, aggressive, expressions of that person's feelings. So what I understand with sārambha is that when someone now, like how we can say that someone has sārambha is that when someone is impetuous, that person, because that person is impetuous, uh, moves on to a level called uh, being vehement. Now, when someone is being vehement because of being impetuous, then that person may show two negativities actually. The first negativity is retaliations. Now, this is what we often find in the sources. Second, that person may show emulations like trying to imitate or trying to match what others have achieved, progress in their lives, and this person wants to. I'm actually going to detail and explain in more details in this talk. So now, if I'm to remember you, you know, remind you uh, what is sārambha. Sārambha means impetuousness, which causes uh, vehemence, so that that person may show two things, two negative behaviors. One is uh, uh, what you call, you know, uh, that person is trying to retaliate, and then or uh, trying to emulate what others have achieved in their lives, right? So now this is what we usually understand with sārambha. If you take a you know uh, closer look at of this term and how it's been used in the canon. In order to understand this word, we can look for some of the textual readings actually. I found two stanzas which have sārambha in the Dhammapada. 133 verse of Dhammapada, which comes under Dandavagga, says, Māvocha parusang kanchi vutta pati vadeyutam dukkhahi dukkhanhi sārambha kata patidanda puseyutam. Okay. Māvocha parusang kanchi. Do not speak harshly to anyone. I don't think in Buddhist teachings, harshness in any kind of activity, be that be that a thought, be that a word, be that an action. I mean, any harshness is not actually endorsed, by the Buddha in his teachings. So anyway, do not speak harshly to anyone. Because why? Vutta pativadayutan. What you say will be said back to you. I mean, usually when you are harsh, other people will be harsh too. Harsh too. Like if that person is actually not really into the basic understanding of or deep understanding of Buddhist teachings or whatever their own teachings, they might, good perspective, they might actually react to you badly. Dukkhan hi sārambha kata. Now we find sārambha in this third line. Hostile speech is painful. Okay, so that means when someone is into hostility, by ways of actions, words and thoughts, they are actually painful executions, activities, right, to the both parties. Patidanda pusayutang, and you will meet with retaliation, right? So sārambha has been used to define, interpret about retaliations in this verse. On the other hand, in the next stanza, that means 134th stanza in Dhammapada, under Dandavagga, says, Sache neresi attanang kanso upahato yatha esa pattosi nibbana sārambho tena vicchati. Sache neresi attanang kanso upahato yatha. If, like a broken bell, kanso upahato yatha, sache neresi attanang, you do not reverberate. I mean, like as a broken bell, I mean, which I suppose to have been made of, clayware, you'll be able to actually make it back in the same way how it was before. So you do not actually reverberate or retaliate with the person. Esa pattosi nibbanang sārambho tena vicchati. Then you have attained nibbana or stillness, and no hostility is found in you. Now see, sārambha does not find in that person. So retaliation plus this hostility. I think retaliation arises when someone is hostile, right? So then that mentality which brings that person into retaliation is hostility. So Buddha identifies sārambha as hostility or retaliation in these two stanzas. And in one of the other sutras called Badhya Lichavi Sutta, which comes under Anguttara Nikaya, numerical sayings of the Buddha, and fourth section, which is called Chatukka Nipata, there's this sutra which we call Badhya Lichavi Sutta. We understand that Buddha instructs this king called Badhya Lichavi that actually he asked few questions about Buddha's way of approaching people, and he said that Buddha has been maintaining a sort of like a miraculous way of approaching people. And he said to the Buddha, I heard from other people you have been using a different method which has been attracting people in a different way. And Buddha said, no, I haven't been actually approaching people in a different way, in a miraculous way. And do not believe anything just by heresy, or just by traditions, just by sayings of other people. So you need to consider all the channels to understand what could be wholesome, what could be unwholesome, what could be right and what could be wrong, right? The same thing that we find in the Kalama Sutra, right? So the same thing that we see in the Kalama Sutta is mentioned in this Bhadya Lichavi Sutta. And then Buddha instructed him to use a way going beyond the same teachings of Kalama Sutta, about how, about kusala and akusala, wholesome and unwholesome. He taught him a way how he can separate out wholesome and unwholesome. He said there is lobha, which means greed. There is dosa, which means hatred. There is moha, which means illusion, ignorance or delusion. And there is sārambha, which we been talking about just a few minutes ago. And Buddha says, if someone can take care of one's greed, if someone can overcome one's greed and hatred and ignorance or delusion, and at the same time retaliation or this hostility, which you call retaliation mentality or that emulation mentality, that helps that person to separate out what I've been really teaching, to people, to individuals. So this is what I've been teaching, and I have no miraculous way of attracting people. Now you can kind of like look at these four. Now Buddha has emphasized, stress on the significance of these four. I mean, sārambha is as much as important as lobha. It is as important as dosa, this sārambha thing is as important as moha too. So these are actually equally important. So that's why Buddha said these four things are actually important, in which we see sārambha, so retaliation. So as I been mentioning to you, sārambha means impetuousness, which leads to vehemence, and at the same time that leads one to retaliation on one hand, on the other hand is overly emulation, right? So I have few techniques to present to you in order to overcome this unnecessary nature, because this prevents us from entering a wholesome life, kusala life. So the first tip that I recommend one to follow is not to be reactive when someone is actually being so mean to you. Actually, you might perhaps deal with some of the bulliness, in your different type of lives. You might perhaps deal with people who you think that you can't make them good people. In those situations, what you really need to keep in mind is not to speed up your reactions. You need to take some time. You need to slow down. Actually, maybe if you take some time, without reacting to that person, you're going to be really proactive. Like when you are really proactive, you know what to talk, where to go, when to start, and all these slight tricky things in order to deal with that person or situation or time or whatever, etc., etc. I think I need to ask you to bear with the interruption of the connection at this point. I think I was just talking about the first technique in understanding how to cope up with this sārambha. I was actually instructing you to understand this first technique called not being reactive but being proactive. Okay. Number two is about emulation. A lot of people, they think that they really want to do what other people do without having a vision about what that person seriously wants to do. For example, like I would say, if someone has any type of achievement or any success, any progress, if there is another person who really wants to do the same thing without being really serious about that thing for one's life, I think that doesn't make sense, and that person might end up with something being really frustrated. So this overly emulation thing, not even just the emulation, this overly emulation thing can really make that person really uncomfortable, and that really cost their time. I mean, I think they waste their time. So if you can really, I mean, I don't say that in, for example, like in school, there may be a good student who might be, scoring well. There may be another student who might think, okay, I need to do better, but that doesn't mean that I really want to emulate that student. Uh, and I only focus on that student. I won't actually do better than that student. So what this student should think is that, okay, I mean that student is actually really good, but I'm going on my way. I'm gonna do better in my way, right? I mean, but this is not what happens to many. And I know like there are people like who might think, okay, my friend knows this many teachings of the Buddha, but I don't know anything. So maybe I should start from today to emulate my friend who knows those bunch of teachings, so I won't actually emulate that person. I mean, why do we really want to emulate other people without having a really good clear picture about our vision? I think people copy mission of other people, not the vision. So then actually we need to understand what we seriously want in our life in terms of secular and unsecular life, right? So that is really important too. That's number two. Number three is I understand all these things arise because of ignorance. And the self that is created by this ignorance thing. So if we can really understand what is our conventional self, what is anatta, and the primary cause of these two, which is ignorance or moha, I think we can take care of this sārambha in a better way. So once again, no, not being reactive but being proactive, not being emulative, or not being over emulative about what we really seriously really want to find out in our life. I mean, we have to find out what we really want, not because other people do that. We seriously want to do a good research of what we really want to do in our life, not simply because other people do, so we want to do that the same thing, right? So that's not what we should focus on in our life. Third thing is looking at this ignorance and conventional self and anatta, concepts. I think these three steps will be helpful for you to overcome or deal or work with this sārambha thing. I hope you learned something new today. Have a good night. Thank you.